Hi there. Welcome back to Ask Amy. I have a question today from Monica. Monica says, when I was 13 years old, I had an experience when I looked in the mirror and suddenly it became very quiet in my head and I saw myself from the inside and outside at the same time. My body felt like a lump of meat. I couldn't believe that it was me, that the body was me. I got very scared and my heart started to race. I experienced this from time to time, that the silence came over me, but I was so afraid that I started to distract myself and turn on music as loud as I could to make it go away. I don't know what that experience was, but I'm afraid that it will come again. I know I live my life out of a survival mode, but I'm afraid to lose my mind and go crazy. I guess it's my mind that is afraid of losing itself. I don't know. I would be grateful for some clarity. So, Monica, I can see how that experience can feel really scary. And I think probably most people have had a similar experience. Maybe it hasn't felt so scary to them. Maybe it had. I think for many people it has. It may or may not. But, and of course, the specifics of the experience will be different for people. But I think, to me, this is just my interpretation of it or what I hear in this. When things like this happen, when we have that glimpse and suddenly we don't recognize anything, things just look completely different from the reality it looks like we live in, I think that's us getting a real glimpse behind the curtain as to what's really going on here. What that shows us, if any of us can look in the mirror or look around and have a radically different experience of life in this moment, where me, who we think we are, how everything looks, whatever that is, when that can just completely change, of course a mind comes in and says, you're losing your mind. You're not in reality anymore. You're losing your mind. Something's wrong with you. This shouldn't be happening. And of course, fear can show up. But the thing is, I think we all know, at least in some way, we have some bigger sense that what we see when we open our eyes and look around, me as separate from you, as separate from everything else in the world, like if we're here listening to this conversation and we're interested in this stuff, we already know that this is not the end all be all. Like what we see in this physical world, and science tells us this, like this thing is not solid the way that it appears to be totally solid. We know just even from science. So if we believe in science at all, we know that there's little molecules dancing in here. Nothing is as it truly appears when we see it with our mind. And that goes for you, and it goes for, your body and everything else that you perceived. So to kind of just open up to the idea, ease into the idea that there's a whole formless life beyond this little physical world that we live in, beyond these identities, beyond this perceived separation. Again, I have a sense, Monica, that you know that. You're open to that. You have a sense of that. Now, I totally get that this experience years and years ago was very scary. But consider that all that happened is that you got this really what many people yearn for, this kind of peek behind the curtain. This moment where this reality looked different, was seen through, was not there for a moment, and something else was there. And of course, your mind jumped in and said, oh no, you're losing your mind. This isn't reality. The other one was. The one I create was reality. Of course a mind would say that, right? The one I create, where you're separate and everything's hard and things happen to you, that's reality. The one that I'm in charge of, where I'm in control and we don't lose our minds. We are very much with it and I make things happen. This is how our mind talks. That's, of course, what your mind would say is the reality. So when there's a little movement away from that, when there's a little opening beyond that, Of course, a mind scrambles and jumps in and brings all kinds of fear and says this can't be. But what if, what you experienced in those moments is not inherently scary? It is not the least bit dangerous. It was just a different experience from the one that our mind constantly creates day in and day out. The only problem here, Monica, is that your mind came in with a very strong spin, a very strong interpretation of this, said that's wrong, can't go there ever again, and that has felt real to you for all these years. There's no other problem. Outside of that interpretation, and it's all it is, you don't know anything about what you saw in those moments. Your mind is telling you, your mind is trying to interpret it for you and make sense of it because that's its job. You don't really know anything about this reality, about that reality. None of us do. I don't either. None of us do. But notice that big, heavy spin and that story and that fear. And then that gets brought up again and again. And the mind says, keep me in control. You better keep me in control. I'll save you from that. If you lose your mind, it's bad news. If you quit listening to me, it's bad news. That's the only thing that's creating any suffering here, Monica. Not the glimpse you had, not how anything is gone since then, not the reality of things, not that you could actually lose your mind. None of that. It's just this story that was just a mind's interpretation that popped up in a single moment in time and then has been repeated since then. That's it. So just be super curious. When there's a story like this that arises that brings so much pain and fear and tension and especially clinging, and that's always clinging to our mind or something our mind thinks it knows. When there's that clinging, it starts to become kind of obvious. Okay, this is really the mind just fighting for what it sees as its foothold here, its control. It wants to be in charge. And I mean, literally, that's exactly what your fear is, of losing your mind, of losing control. So it's not even masking itself. It's coming right out and saying it. What I'm afraid of is that you're not going to keep me in charge of your life. Well, shocker, this is not in charge of your life already. It never has been. It has not been for the past years since this happened. It never has really been. It's just up here fighting for control, telling you it needs to be in control, and you get scared when that happens, and that seems believable. It has never been really in control. If your mind has kept you safe and in control since this thing happened when you were 13, then what's with all the fear? What's with all the problems that you say you've had as a result of this? If there's control, stop being afraid. If there's any sense of control, just go have the life. Go make it happen. Have the feelings that you want to have. You can't do that. None of us can, because our mind is not in control to begin with. There is no problem. There's nothing to control. There's just life showing up and unfolding perfectly. And what has shown up and unfolded in your experience over there is a story that's some big scary thing that could happen again. And I just want you to stay super curious about that just simply being a story. There's absolutely nothing more to it than it being a story that has tried to continue and plant itself through time. There is no danger. There is no problem. This, as we see it, is not the full truth of things. Absolutely not. There's literally no way that this is the full truth of things. And that is not a scary fact. It just is what it is. There is more to life than what we see, and there is nothing inherently dangerous or scary about that. So thank you for sending this question, Monica. I really hope this helps. And let me know. Stay curious about that story. It is a story. It is full of bias. It is just a mind's interpretation from a moment in time, not wanting to lose its sense of control. But I promise you there is nothing dangerous and nothing bad is happening. There's just a story that's making it feel scary and dangerous. All right. Send your questions to AskAmy at thelittleschoolofbigchange.com, and I'll be here every Monday speaking to them. Have a great week, everyone.